Hi, this is lesson number 2 for the Apache Longbow. So this is the final render. I'm going to show you Maya in a second. In this lesson I'm going to show how the body was textured. That's this part here. You can see all the like grainy grey features, just kind of like matte but blotchy and stuff. And it looks like quite a realistic metal. I'll just show you a few of them. The same texture was used for all of them, and I just applied different values to the sliders to change the colour slightly. But I used a texture for that. And we're going to show texturing in this video. So people use texturing to shade geometry for characters, weapons, vehicles, but also props and environmental features and things like furniture in a scene, man-made objects, anything. Any object that's in a scene needs colour. So artists do the modelling, sculpting and texturing for characters, and artists often do the rigging and animation too. So to start off with, let's go into Maya. This is the scene file. But what we're going to show to kick it off is that's the texture mode. To start off with, I just built the geometry for it. You can see in this region here it's a bit unfinished. I don't think I have complete logs of every single incremental save that I did, so I've got a few different files. It would just be endless amounts of data if I did that. I think I only saved out the submissions that I made to Normon when I built this project, because I studied a class with them. And you can see the geometry there is a bit sort of out of whack, but in order to show how textures are laid out, you need the UV texture editor, and we need to select the geometry for it. And you can see that it's just all higgledy-piggledy. It goes all over the place. There's no structure to it whatsoever. Whereas if I go into a scene file where it's already been done, we can see that if we go Window Texture Editor here, the UVs are being laid out. And that's the texture behind it. So this grey stuff here is an image that I found online. And that's what's going onto the surface of the polygons. This is just an overlay, the UV texture overlay. So in order to get from this to this, that's what we're interested in. So we're going to select this geometry. I'm going to show you a couple of methods first. So it's all messed up here. If I go File, Export Selection as an OBJ to the desktop and call it Body. Now I go minimize that. Oops, there's quite a lot of them. And then I use this thing called UV Layout. So I drop Body onto UV Layout, which opens it up, and then we're going to load it. And we need to flatten this object, but that's how you get it into UV layout. But obviously you can see that the problem here is that this was slightly more unfinished version, so I'm going to have to load a later version that's already got them laid out. But we're going to show how the layout process works. We don't want all these bumps, and we want the geometry to be a lot cleaner. You can see it's kind of uneven there because I hadn't finished it off and split it in half and then mirrored the geometry so that it looked good. It was all kind of sculpted and weird looking. It's really hard to build geometry here. It takes a long time. So let's close that. Exit. This time, instead of having those ones, we're going to go to this Maya file here and go File. Let's just see. Like I say, the UVs are already laid out here. but we're going to show how that's done in UV layout to get from that sort of mix of really weird polygons over to something that's laid out. So export selection to the desktop again. We're going to call it body. Export. Here's a, oh no, that's a binary. That's no good to us. Let's do it again. File, export selection. This time change it over to OBJ isn't listed there. That's annoying. I happen to know that if you go to Window Settings Preferences, Plugin Manager, and then under OBJ Exporter, just check both of those. That should work this time. Export selection. We want to save out as an OBJ export, and we're going to call it body export. Close that. Minimize here. You can see this time the texture map came with it, and I'll show that. That's just an image that I got offline, probably from the side of a ship or something. But this time we're going to drop this body onto UV layout and then go load like that. I'm going to show a couple of the little techniques that you use in UV layout to get this thing sorted. So let's just rotate it all the way around. You can see that the front of the ship is pretty much sorted now, because in Maya at this stage I'd finished the modeling to a point that I was happy with it. I know it's not awesome modeling, but I'd got to a point where I was happy, so I deleted half of the polygon mesh, mirrored the UVs over, and combined them into one polygon surface. So I'm happy with that. But obviously the UVs for texturing the object weren't laid out properly. So we need to find the symmetry line by mousing over the line of symmetry and hitting C to continually get more and more lines until you have the whole thing. Hit enter to break the pieces apart when mousing over. So this is going to take a little bit of time. This is the midline here, because you can see it's kind of between those bits. So if we start, I'm just mounting over the middle line and hitting C. I'm going to do that over and over again all the way throughout the model until it's done. Let's go up here. I think it's probably about there. That looks about right to me. Yeah, there's probably too many edges on this model, by the way. You wouldn't normally put this level of detail onto something that you're bringing into UV layout. You'd use proxy smoothing to get the model smooth. Later you'd use a proxy mesh inside Maya for the final render. But I don't think my tool chain, my methods are too awesome at the moment, because well, there's a lot going into art design and programming for video games and 3D and stuff, and it just takes ages to learn everything. So that's why I'm struggling with this stuff. This project is actually from 2009 as well, so it's quite old, but I'm showing lots of things on the site. Maya, Unreal Engine, Lotro, showing how MMOs work by playing Lotro, and C++ programming as well. So it's taken me quite a lot of years to learn all those techniques. So anyway, just following this method, I'm going to have to rotate that all the way around and start going this way now. there might actually be a method of getting this program to choose this symmetry line around the whole object. But if there is, I don't know where it is, because I've just pulled up this file to show some stuff, and I'm basically trying to remember how I did stuff to put on the site so that people know what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Because all these projects are just hidden away in my well, just on hard disks initially, and now it's my entire portfolio. The 10-year body of work is on iCloud Drive as well, so it's stored server side, just so that I don't risk losing it. Because I would like to be able to show everybody exactly what I've been doing. And there's just simple renders and simple things like this. Oh, is that an edge there? You just kind of missed that out as well, so you got to make sure you get every single one. We'll know if this works in a second. Let's see there. There. Oh, that's about right. So now enter to break them apart. If this works, we'll know. I think that kind of worked. And then D to drop that side, D to drop that side, and then you press 1 to go over to the UV space. Now this is where we start selecting them, and then if you hold space and the left mouse, well, I'm left-handed, I'm using the mouse with my left hand, so if these instructions are wrong, just basically do the opposite of what I say. I use the left mouse to drag whilst holding space to scale it, the right mouse button to rotate it whilst holding space, and the middle mouse button and space to move it. So we need to rotate it, let's say this way, scale it down a bit, and middle mouse button to move it across. Let's scale it down a bit more, middle mouse button, scale it down a bit more. Now we'll select this object, same thing. Whoops, they're both selected there. Whoops. I'm not even sure why that's not working. Alright. Right, seems to be working now. Now deselect, we want to zoom into the UV space, so this is 0, this is 0, 1, this is 1, 0, and this is 1, 1. So UV space is in from 0 to 1 in 2 dimensions, and that's how you map the pixel shading data from a bitmap image onto the surface of the polygons. But just select that again, space, and zoom, middle mouse to right mouse button to get it about right. Now zoom it up a bit, move it across, zoom it up. So, whoops, it's about fitting in there. Let's just go into this UV space really nicely. I'll deselect and select this and scale it up a bit, and that'll be about right. By the way, this is not an awesome method that I used to texture the UVs, because I ended up with a huge seam, so that's no good. And also, if I go back over to Maya, like these regions here, where this kind of sticks out, should be split off into a separate piece, and really it should all be broken down into many pieces, but for the purpose of showing this video, I'm just going to split it in two and then use UV layout to flatten it out. So now that I've got them in that position, it's hold your mouse button over the object or select it and hold your mouse button over it, then Shift F. And we're actually going to run that for 4 minutes, so I'll do it now. Right. So this part of the process, the idea is that the blue regions are okay. We need to get rid of all this red that's accumulated. So we're going to let the algorithm process for a bit, and it's going to look very different. But actually, it's going to take. The first stage is basically flattening. And the second stage is, the first stage is stretching and the second stage is flattening of the UVs. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Yeah, by the way, the same process is done for both halves of the model. And actually, I forgot to write some notes on this stage, but eventually after 4 minutes, let's say we're on 15.5 minutes into the video before, so I'll leave it till about 19.5 minutes until all this red disappears. Now normally it wouldn't take this long. If you had a character and you split it up into many different pieces, this process would go by really fast. But basically we're going to wait until all this red here disappears and off of the tail, and then eventually we're going to, like it says in the coda, press the space button to release the boundary, which is going to really flatten out those UVs and make it so that whatever bitmap image you put underneath it, all those pixels are going to be mapped onto the surface of the polygons and shine through on the final render. So we're just waiting for this process to happen now. About another 2 minutes I want to leave it, because I want this to look right, because I'm showing you, and actually I want to save out an OBJ of this polygon object and show you the half that's been flattened and the other half, to show you the difference. So it's just a waiting game now. About another minute. If you want to fast forward by about 1.5 minutes, I'm just going to be rambling on while this algorithm computes. This is actually the only ever time that I used UV layout throughout my whole development days while I created all these project files, I think. And I've tried a bit of digital sculpting, like sculpting a polygon mesh in ZBrush and then retopologizing the mesh and then laying out the UVs, all part of the process for basically having a character that looks realistic but is not too expensive to compute in terms of number of polygons and all that sort of thing. So we're getting closer now, about 1 minute off until I press spacebar, and then actually the bad news is we're going to have to wait another 4 minutes for that to flatten out. But once that time's up, we'll be able to export it, go back into Maya, bring it in and show the difference between the half that was flattened using this method and the other half that's not flattened. And then we're going to go in and show how to map a texture onto the color map for an OBJ, a polygon object. So I'm pressing space now to relax, and this is kind of interesting. You're going to see a lot of little loops that are going to appear, and eventually those will flatten out. So all this is we want all these red regions to disappear, and we don't want loop-de-loops like that in it. A proper character that you break up, like this object, you could break it up into many pieces, and this process would be a lot faster. You could, especially this region here, and the tail really, but it's this region here that makes it so expensive to compute, because as you can see here, it's kind of sticking out, and like the UV space is orthogonal to the front of it, so if you imagine a plane going up here, just a flat plane looking at these polygons, this is what the UV space looks like. So we might possibly have to wait until the video is 23.5 minutes in before this is flattened out. Because I've already tested this just to see what was going on. I probably left it about 10 minutes for stretching and 10 minutes for flattening before. When I actually built the project itself. But just to shorten the video, I'm doing 4 minutes for each process. I hope these little loops manage to resolve themselves. So if we get it looking nice, you can see they're kind of disappearing. If we get it looking nice, it'll be more believable in terms of you believing that this is the process that you go through to set up the UVs for an object so that it looks right when it's rendered. Just another 90 seconds now. This loop here is almost complete. Space to stop. Eventually, I'll press that, and it'll take us back to the UV space with the new object all flattened out. I think once this is pretty flat, once this loop has come out, which it's just about to come out, then we'll do it. These objects up here still a bit messy. Let's have a look at the UV space window, UV texture editor, select the object, enlarge. Yeah, it was always a bit tight around these regions with the white polygon lines there. These were flatter because I think I probably left it about 10 minutes to stretch before, and about 10 minutes to flatten. Let's go back, see if it's done it yet. That loop's almost come out. I think once that loop's finally out, we'll stop it from running. This area up here is starting to look a lot nicer. It's almost about there. Slow process for this particular object. It is anyway. We're about done there. Just wait for this little red pixel to disappear. A couple more. I think I'll call it there. Space to stop that from running. Oh, you need to draw focus to the window. There we go. Now the object's selected, so space and left mouse for me to reduce its size. So that's the UV space, and that's the difference between that half and this half that hasn't had any work done to it yet. Now what we're going to do is go straight up here to save, and we're going to save it as an OBJ, but we're going to put it on the desktop as body import. and save that and dismiss. Now if I go minimize that back to there, you can see body imports there. So let's bring up this empty version of Maya. I'm just going to drag this object into here, and that's this is flattened now with one half that's being properly flattened, and the other half is just separated and dropped onto the UV space. Because separating and dropping, let's have a look. UV texture editor. As you can see, this has just been separated from the other half and then dropped to the UV space, but this is actually being flattened, and this will be a lot easier to, this will look a lot more realistic when you texture it. And it's very similar to what you can see over in headers. Sorry, UV layout. Right, just bringing my notes back up. Back to Maya. Let's have a look. What are we on now? 26 minutes through the video. Okay. So we've saved out the OBJ and brought it back into Maya to show you the difference. Right, now we're going to show the Hypershade. So how was a material applied to this polygon object to make it look realistic in the render, and how was this background, this texture here, which is just a bitmap image that I found online of the side of the metal on the side of a ship or something, how was that mapped onto the material so that it showed on the UVs on the polygons. To do that, we need to go to Hypershade. That's this one here, and you can see main body. So this is the color node here, and you can see something's mapped to it because there's a box with a little arrow pointing inwards. So if we go to that and click edit, you can see it brings up the file that was used. And just to double show you, this is the textures folder. So you can see it's UV layout, Stephen Weisman 10 textures, and then this galvanized steel. That's actually, if you look at the path of this, that's inside the project files. So back over here, in textures, Stephen Weisman 10, obviously the scene file is in scene, that's the scene that we're looking at, but the textures, this is the texture that was mapped onto it, and you can see it's just this one. So in Photoshop, let's bring Photoshop up. This is the texture, and you can see how the UV space looks by bringing up this. So this is where I was considering painting the rivets. I'll show back in Maya that I actually ended up modeling each rivet because my techniques at manipulating pixels inside Photoshop weren't too good. I didn't know all the tools available to me and stuff like that. So if you zoom into these rivets and select them, you can see they're actually just tiny little objects modeled out of polygons. But you can see I had a go at being able to paint them rivets in, and what you'd do is you'd have the UV showing like that, and then you'd know roughly where to let's select this object here. You can go to the move tool and move this around, and then just line them up on the UV texture map and start manipulating stuff and really get a color. But you need to know all the tools inside Photoshop to do some texture painting like that, and I think it's very it's not complicated, it's just it takes a while to learn it. So I modeled them all manually. So that's UV layout. It's most interesting with characters. It's basically fancy colouring in 3D inside a computer, otherwise known as shading, hence the name Hypershade in Maya. If you look here, you can see that this window here is known as the Hypershade, or if I go window, and it would be rendering editors, Hypershade, it brings that up there, and that's the Hypershade. For programmers, programmers who make programs like Maya or Unreal Engine, graphics libraries like DirectX have HLSL, that's High Level Shading Language, and OpenGL has GLSL, which is OpenGL Shading Language. And this is where programmers tell the computer how to add colour to a polygon when they're building the editors that the artists and designers use to build movies and video games. And we'll be showing a lot more about code with Unreal Engine in the future, because actually that Unreal Engine 4 now is free to all developers. You only pay a royalty if your game ships and makes any money. You don't have to pay for the source code. All the tools are free. I mean, it's awesome really that you can see what's under the hood of a piece of software like that for free, totally free. It's phenomenal. Okay, so that's it for the video. That's how the renders for these were done for the body of the Apache gunship. Thank you. Bye.